lot of people ask me how I got into music photography. It's a great story that I like to tell whenever I get asked the question. It's kind of not very conventional. Most people rise up through the ranks and do it, you know, the long slogs. A little bit different for me. I've always loved country music, and in 2009 I did a road trip with my ex-wife, and we travelled around the States, and we really became fond of it, and I pursued that afterwards. And at the time, in around about 2010, 2011, country music was evolving very slowly in the UK. There's always been this stigma with it, where, you know, people associate it with Stetsons and cowboy boots and all the old school country type things, whereas it's actually currently been evolving a lot. And slowly that stigma was beginning to break in the UK. I mean, I say that very slowly. It was 2013, early 2013, and I had become acquainted with some people who were heavily in the scene over here, and I managed to get myself a pass to shoot a intimate gig in London for an artist. Well, it was a songwriter session that was put on by the Country Music Association in Nashville, and the headliner, I guess, was a current artist at the time. His name was Chris Young, and Chris Young's got a, if anyone knows the guy, he's got a big female following in the States, and all round really. Just got a very, very manly voice and quite a sensual voice. And I was photographing at this small venue in West London, and I was quite impressed with the photos I got. It was my first actual real foray into understanding lighting and how lighting and music and movement and everything works together. And I soon found out, after posting them on social media, that so were quite a lot of other people, significant amount of people. That little delusion didn't last very long, because I soon discovered what I mentioned earlier, that, you know, Chris Young's very popular with the ladies, so it was more about eye candy than photography candy. But, you know, the delusion that my photos were great. I mean, they were quite good. I was under this delusion, and I thought, well, I'd like to do more of this. And it's a good story, because a lot of times in life you just sort of go with the flow, and you let things, well, you wait for things to happen to you. And this was one of those moments where I decided, you know what, I'm not going to wait for anything to happen. I'm going to try. What have I got to lose? You know, that's how I saw it. So knowing that it was from the Country Music Association that hosted the event, and they didn't have anybody that was covering it, I quickly scoured through the internet and got a phone number for the CMA in Nashville, and gave them a call, just with the pure intention of, you know, I was a nobody, you know, in the music photography scene. So I thought, why not reach out? And I thought I'd send them the photos and allow them to use it. Delving into that kind of direction is a whole different story, but basically I thought, what have I got to lose? One of two things will happen. I'll either find somebody who will say, yeah, we'd love to use your photos, and constantly take the piss, you know, time and time again, or I might find someone that thinks, whoa, this guy reached out to us, an honest person. And thankfully it was the latter, and that's how my relationship with the CMA began. He saw me as somebody that reached out and thought it'd be nice to help out, and saw my passion for the genre, and it kind of just steamrolled from there. You know, 2 weeks later I was photographing the inaugural C2C Country to Country Music Festival at the O2 in London. 4 months later, I was shooting the CMA Music Fest in Nashville. Soon I was put into contact with the BBC, who saw, people started seeing my work ethic and the quality that I was outputting, and the BBC were interested in getting me on board, and by November that same year I was shooting the CMA Awards. This was like a buzz for me, like a real.
And the big news tonight is that Eric Church will be potentially performing his new song, which could either go down like a lead balloon or it could be very well welcomed, but apparently it's not country, which will be very interesting to see the reaction. But yeah, my most exciting thing about tonight is going to be seeing Alan Jackson and George Strait, two of the greatest, and this is a great city. I love it.
I'd spent so many years beforehand thinking, I'd really like to be one of those cool guys in the pit, but it'll never happen because, an unknown to try and get, a commission by Kerrang magazine or, NME or anything like that just ain't going to happen. But I got my break, and it was all my doing, so I'm quite proud of that. And I think that might be the pivotal moment for me that made me realise that you've got to go out and embrace things. You've got to take them. You can't wait for things to happen to you. And that particular analogy is carried over in everything I do these days. So, from there, it's skyrocketed. I was shooting the CMA Fest every year. I was shooting C2C Country to Country in London every year. And the scene was growing over here, so more and more artists would come over, so people would get in touch with me through somebody else and who'd seen my work or who'd worked with me, and quite soon I was put artist facing and client and management facing, and it became relentless. I was flying to Nashville, I think in 2015 it was 9 times. It took its toll, it really did, but you get caught up in that kind of stuff. I'm guilty of it. I was very much caught up with it. I had this dream of being a tour photographer. That was the buzzword in my mind for so long. I've got to be a tour photographer. That's where the prestige comes, or the ability to expand on your creativity. When in actual fact, tour photography is a lot more than what meets the eye. It's almost like a personal assistant role, which wasn't really my thing, I discovered later. But the bottom line was, I was relentless. I think at one time I was over in Nashville for 5 days shooting the CMA Awards, and I ended up with 6 hours sleep the whole time. Yeah, I was working a lot, but I was also partying and having fun. I'd made a lot of friends over there. And it became, one of those situations where you're no longer really working when you're doing something you love, and I didn't feel like it was work, but what I didn't realise was that it was taking its toll on so many other things, namely my marriage, my relationship with my kids, my health, and it took a long time before I realised this. It took a few sequence of events for me to actually realise this, but in the meantime, I was oblivious to it. I would be home, I would be editing late at night, hours and hours in front of the computer, and I created this brand of flex, flex the frog, get flexed, and I evolved my brand over time, and it was good because the way I saw it was I was doing something to make myself stand out in front of a sea of brilliant photographers, and anything that I could do using my marketing background to be able to put things like that into place, little things, I would do. And I know I kind of didn't make many friends along the way, because suddenly there's this guy out of nowhere and he's getting all the gigs, and he's advancing really quickly, where people had been doing it for years and had been jaded by the whole scene. But I was fresh, and that's the kind of person I am. I don't take things for granted. And I was excited, when my brand just took off, and I was getting so much interaction on social media. I mean, Facebook just blew out. I'd get some of the artists tweeting some of my photos. I remember a Dierks Bentley photo, which I was so proud of, that I caught it, and I'd driven, 150 miles back home that night to just make sure I'd caught it sharp. And I did, and I sort of sprained my ankle in a little victory dance that I'd done at 4 o'clock in the morning with having to get back in the car 3 hours later and do the other 150 miles for day 2. This was my life. And of course, family suffers, and I'm not proud of it. I can't regret anything, because life takes you in different directions, and it's all a learning experience, and my life's a journey, and that was part of the journey. I've got 2 amazing kids now, and I have joint custody with my ex, and we co-parent relatively well, and things are going smoothly, but rewind the clock, I'm kind of very, very conscious and aware of the mistakes I made, and I made loads. Am I sorry for them? Well, you can't regret. I'm in a good place now, and have been for quite some time. And the things I've done and the things I've seen since the time that I that I had this realisation, that I kind of screwed up. My life has actually been lived, whereas previously I was just going through the motions for a long time. So it's been a real journey. I mean, the country music scene was, or the music scene in general, the music photography scene in general, I learnt a lot. And it's all self-taught, and it's all going through, making mistakes, firing thousands of frames, and learning how to cull that down and actually take the next step and reduce the amount of photos you take. Because that's the only way you learn. And I did that, and I, grew close to a lot of people in the industry, both artists, management, fans, the whole lot. And it all kind of stopped when I stopped. It was kind of really, really interesting. It was a little bit of a wake-up call. In 2016, that kind of spans about 3 years from the time that I started all this. My marriage was on the rocks. It had been for quite some time. It was inevitable. We had decided to separate, and the wheels were set in motion with the sale of the house and all that kind of stuff. It was about March 2016 that my ex moved out. A couple of weeks later, or a month later, my mum passed away in Australia, which I had a lot of guilt for not being there, and I had all this free time. I didn't have the kids around until the weekend, and I had all this free time. I was struggling financially because, as things like that happen with separations and divorces, my business took a bit of a hit, and I was struggling. I was really struggling. So I was trying to make amends with that, but at the same time, the work wasn't coming in. And I was in a pretty dark place, so I felt I'm going to turn to what I think works best for me, and that's photography. I had lost a fair bit of enthusiasm for it because the previous year, or probably the previous year, I'd started getting a little bit bored, and I'm the kind of person that needs to constantly be stimulated, If I find something is not stimulating me like it used to be, then I will try and do something new. I will either move on or try and create something, as unorthodox as it may seem. And I was starting to do that because I realised, and I could see with all the stuff that I was pulling out, I was going and doing my own little projects which had nothing to do with music, but I just felt like, I'd photographed all the artists, there's only so much I can replicate before it all starts looking the same. To me, everyone else loved it. They were getting all the content. Fans were getting, you know, regular updates. My social media network was really, really booming. But for me, it didn't work anymore. And I guess with all that kind of stuff that was happening with the, you know, the start of the year was really bad for me. I just thought, you know what, I'm going to take a step back from this all. And it wasn't something that I sat down and really thought about. It was just how I felt. I looked at a few things and I thought, no, I need something more. I need something to renew I don't, you know, one thing I always said to myself was, I don't ever want to lose the passion for something I love so much, like photography. And I could see it happening and I thought, no, I need to re-inject that passion. So I kind of put two and two together and thought, well, I've got all this free time. And what I used to do years and years ago, before the kids came along, was get up at ungodly hours of the morning. You know, sometimes even midnight. I'd go to bed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and sleep for 6 hours and then get in the car and drive 200 or 300 miles just to get a really nice landscape shot. And I thought, well, it's not the buzz of music, but I might see some beautiful places. So I started doing that. And in the process, you know, I had all this free time, and in the process of doing that, I remember I'd sit down on Flickr and Google beautiful sunsets or something like that, and I'd see a place and I'd mark down its location, and I'd get in the car on a whim and drive and go and just photograph it. Now, not all these locations are very accessible, and I remember the first time I had an experience with the mountains was the tallest mountain in the Brecon Beacons, which is Pen y Fan, which is kind of like a little hill. Someone once said it's like a golf course. But I'd never been up a mountain before, and I'd never even hiked. But I wanted to get some photos, and I remember it was tough. It was a tough hike. I was unfit, and I'd wear flat shoes, jeans, you know, I had no idea. And I got to the summit, and I took some photos, and I saw the sunset over Wales, and I wouldn't say hooked, but I thought, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. So what do? 3 weeks later, on a whim, I decided I'd heard of this mountain called Snowdon, and everyone used to do these challenges up Snowdon for charity. And on a whim, it was a Monday, and I went down to the local camping or outdoors shop, and I bought myself a head torch, and it was about 5 o'clock at night, and I thought, do you know what, I'm going to go climb this mountain. This is me. Why do things orthodox style? I thought, what's the worst that's going to happen to me? I'm confident in my abilities, so I'll get lost. Big deal. I'm warm. I'll call mountain rescue if I have to. But let's do it. And I drove up 3.5 hours to Snowdon, and this is the middle of summer. And I remember as I was coming into Wales about 10 o'clock at night, and the skies were clear except for the top of this little massive, the Snowdon Massive. It was covered in cloud. And I thought, what am I doing here? The sun was going down. It was kind of it was dusk. And I looked at it, and it really intimidated me. But you know, I thought, I've driven 3 hours, I'm going to crack on. I guess this was the moment, this kind of build-up was where I started believing more in myself and thinking, right, there's no hesitation. And hesitation is what kills. Hesitation is what causes accidents. Hesitation is what, you know, makes things not go the way that you want them to go. You need confidence. So, yeah, I got there. And it took me 4.5 hours. I mean, it's not that long a climb or hike, but I hiked up. I got lost a few times. I was hiking with rain. I didn't have that great gear. You know, I had something that I thought was waterproof, but it wasn't that great. I took some photos along the way, but I persisted. I got lost. I backtracked. I started learning that, hey, maybe I've got some good navigational skills even in the dark. Half an hour, they said. And it's a bit of a zigzag climb now, and it's a bit of scrambling. The summit is engulfed in cloud. This is absolutely immense, seriously, in the middle of the night. It's like, what else would you rather be doing at 2 a.m? It's freaking awesome. And I'll tell you what, I'm glad I'm walking down here in daylight, assuming I can stay up there. It's not too hideous, but I'm glad I'll have to make it do, because I'm not walking back down here in the dark. So, yes, when I get to the top, I might do my own rendition of Jack Daniels or some Eric Church song, just because I can, and there's no one else around. I might strip naked and yell out, "I'm Stuart Little!" Don't know why I said that. Okay, off we go. Bye. And I remember thinking, this feeling is insane. It's a paradox. You feel like you own the mountain, but at the same time you feel like the mountain owns you, because I was the only one pretty much on the mountain. Head torch going, and I carried on. And I remember the last section was never-ending switchbacks, dark, going through the clouds, rain, mist. And I hit the summit ridge, and I was above the clouds. And I looked over and I saw the moon rise, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was just the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. That's the moment I was hooked. I thought, I found my place. The silence, the beauty, the feeling of kind of intimidation, but just humility more so. And I sat on that summit shivering, without gloves, thinking, well, it's summer, I don't need gloves. But I sat there till sunrise, and I watched the sunrise, and I just thought, this is where my journey begins.